As we all know, anniversaries are a good occasion to look back and look forward, which is what I intend to do with these few remarks in order to contextualize CERRE's contribution. Looking back for me is fairly easy. It's just going back to the mid-80s when I landed in Brussels with Jacques Delors at the time where he had this vision that we should move Europe from a common market to a single market in order to reap the benefits of EU integration, both for consumers, for workers, for businesses. And the big difference between a common market and a single market was leveling the regulatory playing field. Remember, and it's good to remember that at the time of Brexit, remember that we only removed internal borders within the European Union in 1992, not in 1957. During all these years, between 1957 and 1992, we had internal borders. And the reason why we had that was that regulatory systems were with discrepancies. And only when enough harmonization, enough mutual recognition, enough equivalent system did happen, could we do that. Hence, the big drive, whether goods or services, to leveling the playing field. That was what the internal market was about. It was about a big convergence within the European Union, addressing, of course, all regulatory discrepancies, which, of course, in the area where CERRE contributes, which is basically public utilities, is a bit more heavy lifting than in other areas, just because usually these utilities are in charge of public goods. And you don't really harmonize, regulate, make converge public good regulation like private good regulation. That was the name of the game. It wasn't easy. There were lots of debate at the time. I remember a sort of fight within the Commission, for instance, on whether we should start with energy or we should start with telecoms. At the end of the day, Delors, I think wisely, decided telecoms being at the sort of edge of technology would be more important to start with, hence front-loading telecom regulation leveling, and his intuition was it probably would be much more difficult for energy for a variety of reasons, and I think he was right. Hence, energy was, in a way, backloaded. But overall, the name of the game was convergence. And by the way, for the next 25 years, the name of the game remained convergence, both in European terms, but also, and that's interesting, globally. That was the time of the sort of happy globalization, which translated into trade opening with some leveling of the playing field through converging to norms and standards, and notably in the WTO with services market opening. This sort of happy period lasted until basically the 2008 crisis. And then this is why looking forward is much more complex than looking back. Looking forward is a pretty blurred picture in my view, because overall the global context has changed. The EU drive to economic integration still has to happen, will happen, and the question is at what speed, and that's a very important question. But I don't think the EU drive to convergence within the European Union, apart from Brexit, of course, will halt. We still have a lot to do in order to integrate our various markets. It's roughly down for goods, but we all know that for services it's only down sort of 50%, which in the area of digital, for instance, raises a host of serious issues. So the EU context will not change. What has changed and will keep changing is the global context. From this name of the game convergence before the U.S. crisis, we now are name of the game divergence, the great divergence that has started, notably, between US and China, and which probably will make the next decades of globalization more bumpy than the previous ones, including in regulatory issues. And this is where, for CERRE's context, a new development has happened. Take digital, for instance. We know already full well that the digital world will not be globalized the way the world of medicines or cars or lighters or pesticides has been globalized for the last 30 years. We are heading in this area in a one world, three systems with US and China for sure, and with EU maybe as a big actor in regulation of this growing part of the economy which is dematerializing. And this is the big challenge. Will EU be able to stand in between these two elephants, trade-wise, economy-wise, regulatory-wise? I hope so. I'm not sure about that. Or will we have, at some stage, to make a choice between getting nearer to the US regulatory system or to the Chinese regulatory system, which I personally would not like to happen? That's the big question for the years to come. What does this mean for CERRE's activity, work, contribution? I think it means more interest in what happens outside the European Union. More foresight on where are the US going, regulatory-wise, more foresight on where is China going, regulatory-wise, building on the experience of the RGPD, for instance. This can be a sort of positive influence. Looking also at something which so far is not really on the radar screen, which is where is Africa going? And that's probably the most rapid and growing market for the future, at least for European business. This, I think, is the way we should go in the future.